Hello and welcome to the Penelope Possum channel with me, your host, Penelope the Possum. And today is Spooky Scary Saturday, and we're going to hopefully finish the last bit of chapter 1 of Poppy Playtime. And magically the noise outside has stopped. Ah shit, I forgot my headphone. Headphones! Okay. Oh right, I forgot you can't use a freaking controller on this, which is lame. I got stuck! Okay. Running, hello. Dang it! I think I gotta go the other direction. Please excuse the noises in the recording, because some idiot decided right this second was the fucking best time in the world to mow their lawn! Okay, found it! I got him! Haha! Fuck you! Fuck you! I killed him! He's dead! Oh my fucking god! GG's, guys! We did it! I escaped! And it only took like 2 or 3 tries this time because I was not fucked out of my mind. Holy sheep shit. Okay, we're just gonna move on. Holy banana hats. That was not fun. Why do y'all want me to play horror games? I'm bad at games. Damn. Did he really fall all the way down there? I think I see him. Kinda. It's hard to see the floors in this place. No mas hug your pan too. Okay, we got another tape. Freaking sweet.
Final log in relation. Experiment 1006. The prototype. Coordination and cooperation is evidently within his skill set, as well as the skill set of all other experiments of his type. Though still missing, today's events are no doubt in relation to him. His absence was a flaw in the scientific process, which should have under no circumstances been left unaccounted for. That's why I'm making this log, so that the same mistake won't be made twice. Any future experiments will need to be contained and disposed of in a secure location. I'm not worried about myself. One breakthrough and I'll be back. We must forge onwards in the name of science, whether those who are beneath us understand it or not. End of...
Ha. Deserved. Okay, I guess I gotta go to the flower door with all the toys hanging above it. That's fun. Shit, bruh. That was so fucking stressful. I don't think I want to play any more of the chapters. That was just the worst. I nearly died of a heart attack IRL, guy. The fuck? Well, this place is creepier than hell. Floor's wet. Yeah, no, I don't like this one bit, guys. Am I small, or is everything huge? Hi, Poppy. Your face. You're very pretty. Shit!
You opened my case.
Yes. It does seem like I was getting smaller. Well, that was the end of Poppy Playtime, chapter 1. I didn't like that. No, sir. Not one bit. I made a goose statue to menace me while I work. Well, that was it. Holy cow. From what I understand and seen, the rest of Poppy Playtime is far more reaction time based. Man, that's not gonna be good for me. If you guys do... Oh yeah, I'm gonna make the fucking greatest Huggy Pants statue ever. You won't believe it. He'll be just sitting on my desk, deader than hell. Oh, that's actually a great idea. I got plenty of materials to do that. I'll do that later. Gotta grab my apron. Yeah, little X's for eyes, his tongue sticking out. Blech. It'll be funny. How about a Dr. Bob?
The lasting ringing is ear-splitting, almost as much as the sound of the explosion that rang out only seconds before. The detective looks around.
Let me know if the volume's too low or anything.
Trying to squint through the dust cloud obscuring his vision. A few other figures are stumbling around in confusion. Others are paralyzed with terror, or are worriedly trying to regain their hearing out of fear they've been permanently deafened by the blast. One or two stagger to their feet, climbing out of the debris, and run away as fast as their sprained ankles would allow them to, and the rest aren't lucky enough to still be able to move without help. In minutes, the fire and ambulance crews arrive, clearing rubble and helping the injured to safety. The detective sits on a cinder block and waits for everyone else to be tended to first. He's still got his health, which is more than can be said for some. He scans the area, looking at the mess of debris and destruction. He feels his brain doing the thing already, looking for patterns in the rubble. His eyes fall over the dusty, dumbstruck faces of the people being helped by the paramedics, ticking off those he saw moments before the explosion. He's reconstructing a list from a few seconds of glances, trying to figure out which of them caused the explosion. Whichever face was missing from the ones he'd seen when he'd walked into the baristas that morning was probably the one who did this. The detective mutters something to himself about never getting his morning coffee. Barely a few days pass before the next explosion is reported. Someone's apartment this time around. Luckily, there'd only been one person at home, and nobody in the adjacent homes was harmed. The detective is one of the first on the scene, rushing across town to get a look at the blast site. The previous time, his ears were ringing too much, the shock of being so close when it happened, scrambling all the senses that had been honed over decades on the job. Today, he wants a clearer look. His heart sinks to see the bomb squad have beaten him there. The detective scoffs. They couldn't have been all that good of a bomb squad if they were showing up after an explosion had already happened. Still, it doesn't deter him. He marches up to the hazard tape hanging in a cross in the doorway, with the bottom half of what used to be a door barely clinging to the hinges. Cordoning off the area to the public is hardly going to stop a man of the law. The detective flashes his badge to the fresh-faced beat cop standing guard when he protests, telling the younger officer to let him pass. The officer tells him he's under strict orders not to let anyone in until the bomb squad has gathered all the evidence they need. Peering through the vacant doorway, the detective finds himself barking another question at the officer. Just who is the man who's been allowed inside already? A figure is standing in the wreckage of the apartment, his plain clothes making it clear he's not part of the bomb squad. He's just looking around the ruined room, a forlorn expression on his face while the bomb squad gathers up forensic evidence. The officer explains, as best he can with the limited information he's been given, that the mystery man is some kind of specialized consultant. He arrived with clearance much higher than the city beat cop had ever seen in his brief tenure on the street. He'd been warned that interfering with this man would constitute a crime worse than committing a felony. So the officer had let him through, no questions asked. It was above his pay grade. The detective storms past, the officer's hand blocking him from stepping the threshold into the destroyed apartment. Stopping in his tracks without crossing the cordon, he calls out to the consultant. He asks what's going on. 2 explosions in the same week is hardly a normal occurrence. The consultant doesn't even look over to the detective, just lets his questions hang in the air like the few particles of dust catching the sunlight as they drift through the apartment. The detective is met with a warning from the chief the moment he returns to the precinct. He mentions getting a call from someone important, but fails to divulge who. Noticing his former partner is nervous, even trembling, the detective pushes him for more information on who's swept in and taken the reins of the investigation. How does an outside consultant have the kind of clearance that this one does? Was he a Fed? Something even higher up in the law enforcement food chain than that? CIA, NSA, Pentagon? Every question yields no further answer, just agitates the chief almost to the point of exploding himself. The detective drops the subject, but doesn't intend to let it go. No less than a day later, yet another explosion
I have a bad
rocks the
feeling
city.
this guy's gonna end
This
up
one's
dead.
on the bottom floor of an office block, causing a window to get shattered, but mercifully, not much more damage than that. And the detective is ready this time. Sitting in his car waiting, he races over to the scene, getting there before even the first responders. But he doesn't get out to be the first to look. Instead, he waits, watching the scene as cops, paramedics, and firefighters arrive. The bomb squad follows not long after, and sure enough, with them is the consultant. From a distance, the detective watches. Something is off about the man. He's too calm, like all of this is ordinary for him. But it's more than that. The consultant looks almost sad, as if he's not only seen this happen before, but that he's crestfallen to know it's happened again. The detective waits. Clearing the scene takes
This
hours,
guy's getting
and a few more
himself
beat
into
cops
bigger
are left on
poop
guard
than
to
he
keep
needs to
civilians
be getting
away from the
himself
blast site.
into.
The entire time, the detective's eyes are fixated on the consultant.
I predict this guy's going to get memory wipey juice. Hey, bud?
Yeah.
You know that cup I use for paint water?
Yeah.
Could you try to find that for me? I don't know where it is right now.
He wants to know where he's going next, so he can follow.
Thank
He tails
you.
the consultant as he leaves the scene, keeping at a distance that won't make him too obvious. All he has to do is wait for the crowd to thin out, or for the consultant to walk down somewhere quieter. An alleyway would be perfect. Seeing his target cutting through the crowd towards a quiet, narrow back street, the detective seizes the opportunity and weaves between oncoming pedestrians. He turns the corner and walks right into the consultant. The other man
Thank you,
stops,
dear.
recognizing the detective's face after a split second, then turns to run. The detective races after him as fast as his legs will take him, fingertips reaching for the consultant's coat. He grabs him and causes the consultant to stumble. He threatens the detective that he'll never see the outside of a prison cell for even daring to interfere. So the detective snipes back. If that's the case, then the consultant might as well explain himself. After all, if he's sent to prison, the detective can hardly tell anyone. For a moment, the consultant actually seems to be entertaining the idea. Then he introduces himself under the name Tarrant. When the detective asks him what's been causing all the explosions around the city, Tarrant gives him a straight answer. Hot chocolate. Not many detectives would ever consider hot chocolate to be a cause of death. Maybe if it had been poisoned or was more than scalding hot. But even the world's top forensic analysts would, in all likelihood, laugh at the possibility. But then again, in their line of work, they never have to
Oh
contend
shit,
with the
we can see a little bit of Dr. Bob's face here. Now we're making a little huggy wuggy or huggy pants. Yeah, more than usual.
anomalous. There are experts for cases like those. SCP-5073 is not, as it turns out, a highly poisonous substance or an existential glitch caused by some mad reality warper. It is, however, hot chocolate. As far as anyone can tell, there's absolutely nothing differentiating it from an otherwise ordinary cocoa powder-based drink, other than the effect it has on people. Nothing differentiating SCP-5073 from normal hot chocolate actually couldn't be more accurate, as even the packaging containing this extremely hot drink seems to resemble that of legitimate brands. The packets that the anomalous
How
powdered
odd.
hot chocolate mixture is found in seem to have been almost intentionally circulated among popular brands, possibly in an effort to fatally trick consumers. Some packets have even been found sold within boxes containing other packets from legitimate hot chocolate brands. Normally, one packet will be sold alongside those that are otherwise safe for human consumption. Foundation
Why are you
efforts
trying
to
to
trace
eat
this
my
back along the
shit?
distribution chain are still ongoing. There are still numerous agents who are currently embedded within various companies responsible for the manufacture of hot chocolate powders and the shipping of these products to retail outlets. At present, shipments containing SCP-5073 have only been uncovered in the Western Hemisphere, in a
Okay.
distribution
Huh. So, it's only our problem. Okay, got it.
pattern of one packet of SCP-5073 per 1 million units of normal hot chocolate mix manufactured. The powder itself bears no obvious difference to look at either, although it can be slightly stickier and often generate a slightly warm sensation. These minor
Ew.
differences, however, has seemingly been able to remain undetected to those who have unknowingly consumed SCP-5073. After all, you have to be some kind of maniac to touch your hot chocolate powder with your hands. Use a spoon, you heathen. The powder within SCP-5073 is, as far as anyone can tell just by looking at it, identical to the cocoa powder in other chocolate beverages. However, when examined far closer on a microscopic level, there are a few irregularities that the average consumer might not notice, but a researcher of the SCP Foundation might. In
Might.
particular, the granules of SCP-5073 are surprisingly durable, implying that they may not actually be cocoa, but some other substance that has yet to be identified. And yet again, they seem to also generate a low level of warmth. SCP-5073 powder doesn't react the same way that
I
other
get
cocoa-based
it.
powders
Hot
do when added to
chocolate.
liquids.
It's literal.
Well, usually, hot chocolate is designed to dissolve in milk, or water if you still haven't learned your lesson from before. SCP-5073 does not. Instead of the granules breaking up in the way you'd expect, they instead remain together. They will stay suspended below the surface of the milk, keeping the undissolved anomalous powder hidden from view. While submerged, SCP-5073 will then exude a liquid that seems to resemble chocolate in smell, taste, and color, flavoring the milk and changing it from white to brown. This leaves a beverage containing SCP-5073 completely identical to a typical cup of hot chocolate, even down to tasting indistinguishable from the real thing. Those who consume SCP-5073 do not suffer instantaneous death the second they take a sip. In fact, those who do drink a nice warm of the anomalous chocolatey drink often enjoy, perhaps even a little too much. Individuals who have drunk SCP-5073 have been recorded as finding it to be unusually appealing, and often all describe it in an uncannily similar way. Choices of adjectives seem to always revolve around phrases such as the drink having an explosive burst of sweetness, an explosion of
dear.
taste, or similarly worded variations on this sentiment. This is also always considered a positive factor too.
Oopsie.
And those who consumed SCP-5073 will never describe the flavor of the anomalous beverage as being too overwhelming or overpowering, regardless of whether or not they typically enjoy hot chocolate.
kitty.
They also express another
kitty,
unusual
kitty.
side effect, and that is the sudden compulsive need to drink more of SCP-5073
Oh boy, that's
after
not
their
good.
initial tasting. Analysis by Foundation researchers has indicated that there are no inherent addictive properties to the powder, but this doesn't deter those who have consumed it to drink enough of it to use up an entire packet of the powder, even if the amount within is enough to mix into several cups worth.
Goodness.
Then there are the more fatal side effects. Normally occurring within a window of 2 to 3 hours after consumption, a person who has drank SCP-5073 will inevitably explode. No, this isn't
Why,
a euphemism
though?
or any attempt at hyperbole. They will, very literally, detonate. This isn't just hot chocolate. It's explosively hot chocolate. As far as Foundation experts have been able to determine during testing, this explosion occurs within the digestive system of an affected subject. The cocoa granules that remain intact when a person drinks the SCP-5073 infused hot chocolate will suspend themselves inside the subject. These granules will remain at a concentration above the LEL for cocoa dust, short for the lower explosive limit, the lowest possible concentration of a gas or vapor to explode if ignited. This leaves a person in an understandably volatile state, of course. Any introduction of heat or open flame could ignite the cocoa dust and trigger an explosion. Surely, though, this isn't too much of an issue unless someone happens to be a professional circus fire eater and are about to perform their highly flammable act after a warm mug of SCP-5073.
I'm not sure.
Or rather, it wouldn't be too much of an issue if there was any way to prevent the granules from igniting on their own. Staying above their LEL concentration, the SCP-5073 particles will rub together while inside a subject's stomach. These granules are able to generate sufficient intense friction between them enough to ignite. Once this occurs, a dust explosion will erupt from within the unfortunate subject with enough force to blow their body apart. The result is often messy. Given the sheer magnitude of the explosion caused by SCP-5073, detonation can also pose a potential danger to any nearby buildings or other infrastructure, as well as threaten the safety of bystanders surrounding the affected subject.
Understandable.
So, best to stand at a safe distance. Upon examination of the aftermaths of these explosions, SCP Foundation forensic teams have determined that the sweet liquid produced by adding SCP-5073 to milk is left behind among the remains of the deceased subject, given that detonation typically occurs before full digestion is possible. And, well, you try digesting something after your stomach and the rest of your body has blown up. However, it seems that after someone who had consumed SCP-5073 has expired in an explosive fashion, any of the remaining powder will disappear through anomalous means, as well as the packet it was contained in. In addition, and perhaps most unsettlingly, a considerable amount of the subject's body mass normally is missing from their remains, more than would typically be missing after a dust explosion. A few things of note in order to protect yourself from the risk of accidentally drinking SCP-5073. For one, instances of this anomalous hot chocolate will never, repeat, never, be found with additional toppings. That means anything with marshmallows, whipped cream, either chocolate or rainbow sprinkles, graham crackers, or a combination of all the above if you're really decadent, are considered safe and advisable to drink. Secondly, SCP-5073 will remain inert and non-explosive unless it is mixed with milk. Combining it with any other liquids will not render it dangerous, and if you happen to be lactose intolerant, then you're likely safe from sudden hot chocolate-related combustion. Similarly, if the SCP-5073 powder is left as it is, or if, for some deranged reason, someone ingests it as it is, it will continue to remain inert. Adding it to milk and then ingesting the resultant mixture is the only certain way to ensure detonation. Since first discovering the disastrous effects of SCP-5073, Foundation analysts have carefully monitored any and all reports of spontaneous human explosions or anyone thought to have died due to an internal detonation. The Foundation will then dispatch agents to conduct covert investigations in order to determine whether or not these deaths have any connection to the consumption of SCP-5073. If explosively hot chocolate is confirmed to have been the cause of death in any of these cases, the Foundation will issue an appropriate cover story to keep this information from the public. The number of deaths that took place during a redacted time frame was what initially drew the Foundation's attention to SCP-5073. Their assets embedded within law enforcement and emergency services take notice of a number of reports involving human beings exploding and begin investigating. The cause was soon determined to be anomalous hot chocolate. However, within a week, the deaths associated with SCP-5073 appeared to stop. Without any of the cocoa powder recovered intact, the Foundation considers SCP-5073 to be neutralized after 6 months without incidents. But researcher Tarrant isn't convinced. In an informal research log, Tarrant expresses his overwhelming concern that this situation isn't over. At this point, there is no physical evidence of SCP-5073 other than the trace amounts of extremely sweet hot chocolate recovered among the corpses that the ballistic beverage left in its wake, or rather the scattered smithereens of corpses. Despite his fellow researchers seeming convinced that they had already solved the mystery.
Now hold on, what if the missing body mass can be accounted for by the hot chocolate? Hear me out. What if it's like Soylent Green? It's made out of people. Somehow.
Of the explosively hot chocolate, Tarrant remains unconvinced. Based on the forensic evidence pointing to a dust explosion and eyewitness accounts that SCP-5073 had been contained within packets identical to existing brands, there was a working theory about exactly how people were unknowingly consuming the deadly drink. According to the theory, an unknown anomalous prankster was responsible for slipping the self-igniting cocoa powder into the hot chocolate being sold in stores. It was seemingly designed to be sweet enough that a victim would be sure to drink enough in order to explode, and the only reason these incidents had stopped was that this murderous prankster had gotten bored. However, researcher Tarrant was adamant that this theory was wrong. He thought it seemed far too elaborate of a method to eliminate people via explosion, and the idea that these were the actions of a deranged prankster just didn't seem to add up. Although aware that not all anomalies abide by a sense of logic, if someone had engineered SCP-5073, then it would need to make more sense. As far as the researcher
That's
can
fair.
see, there is no sense in making people explode through this method. With that in mind, Tarrant starts to draw his own conclusions about the explosively hot chocolate. He saw discrepancies in the Foundation's prankster theory. The idea that this person got bored and gave up so easily didn't make sense to the researcher. If this supposed prankster had been worried about a Foundation investigation, they probably wouldn't have started exploding people at random to begin with. Tarrant wondered if another external factor was the reason the explosive deaths abruptly stopped. The month that had followed the initial week of SCP-5073 incidents had been unusually warm for so early in the year. Warmer weather means fewer people drinking hot chocolate, and researcher Tarrant thought that if whoever had engineered SCP-5073 had been attempting to meet some kind of quota for the number of victims, then there'd be less opportunity with the weather being hotter. The packets disappearing also bothers researcher Tarrant. If someone had the ability to make physical evidence vanish at will, then why would they use such an elaborate method to blow people up in the first place? Speaking of physical evidence, why not also remove the victims' remains too? That's where Tarrant makes his alarming discovery, something that had previously been concealed by how much the corpses had been blown apart by their internal explosions. He notices there's more meat and bone missing than there should be, and what's left has tiny bite marks on it.
Tiny.
A year
Oh my
passed.
god, it's bugs! It's like bugs or something. Oh my
Before
god.
incidents involving SCP-5073 explosions began again. Although several more lives are lost as a result, the Foundation is at least able to recover intact samples of the anomalous hot chocolate powder that they can analyze, with researcher Tarrant heading up the effort to learn more about SCP-5073. Foundation analysts notice a sudden surge in similar social media posts from areas where the latest explosions take place. All of the posts seem to revolve around sightings of tiny brown spiders. Check out the
I
Dr.
knew
Bob
it.
Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-294, the coffee machine.
But how? Yeah, it's always spiders. Alright, I've got Huggy Wuggy's head done. Just gotta... I think spiders give most people the creeps. Just gotta make Huggy Pants' body and then we're good. And then I think I'm gonna make one more thing. Not sure what yet though.
The hitman pulls back the hammer of his Beretta.
Yeah. It's like... I don't know, man. If I have enough clay after I'm done making the Huggy, I might make something else, though. Ooh. After this, we might watch that, because that looks terrifying.
The suppressor screwed into the barrel will help muffle the terrible crime he's about to commit. They're in the middle of the forest, his victim on his knees in front of him, his hands bound behind his back.
Yeah, or
The
Scorpion.
victim is spewing out excuses and feeble pleas for mercy at a mile a minute, but the hitman remains firm, aiming his handgun at the back of the victim's head. The victim owes his boss a great deal of money, but the hitman can't remember all the details. All he knows is what he needs to do. Bang, bang, bang. 3 clean shots turned into cracks by the suppressor. His victim slumps forward, dead. It's time for the hitman to go home. The job isn't as glamorous as it is in the movies. He lives alone in a relatively small apartment. Most nights, he doesn't sleep well. He has nightmares. He sees every face he sent a bullet through every time he closes his eyes. So, to make himself feel better, he watches his comfort movies with a bowl of microwaved SpaghettiOs. He's been through his DVD collection 1,000 times. None of it has the punch it used to. But he's still got a working VCR, so there's no harm in fishing through the old pile of VHS tapes he keeps in his closet. That's where he finds his well-worn childhood copy of Forrest Gump. It used to be his mom's favorite movie. Perhaps it'll help him sleep tonight. He slots the VHS into the VCR. All the memories are flooding back to him now. He watched this movie so many times as a kid. It's a miracle that he didn't entirely wear the tape out. He's ready to lose himself in the film as he watches Forrest in his white suit sitting on that iconic park bench. The hitman smiles, ready to speak along to the movie's most famous line, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get." But when Forrest says the line, it's "Life was like a box of chocolates." Was. How strange. He doesn't remember the line being like that. It's "Life is like a box of chocolates," not "Life was," right? You wouldn't think such a tiny misquote would bother a man who kills people for the mafia for a living. But it does. This mistake feels so oddly pivotal to his understanding of the film, and therefore, to his understanding of himself. It feels like having a bucket of cold water poured out onto his head. He watches the rest of the movie, but something is off. He feels almost like Forrest Gump himself knows he's been watching. And scarier still, he's watching back. What happened to this nostalgic childhood classic? Over the next week, as he executes more deadbeats and poor unfortunate souls on behalf of his shadowy bosses, he just can't stop thinking about that line. Life was like a box of chocolates. There's something wrong about it, something so terribly wrong. How can he shoot a man dead without losing his appetite? But thinking about Forrest Gump is making his hands shake. He watches the movie every night. Some nights, he watches it more than once, instead of sleeping or showering. Every time he watches it, it feels just a little more uncanny. This movie used to fill him with joy and hope. It made him see the beauty in the world. But now he sees the darkness hiding underneath the surface. Every time he watches, he feels a growing suspicion towards the Forrest Gump character. Every so often, Forrest looks directly at the camera, staring out at the hitman, and smiling. The hitman is sleeping even less now. He gets this feeling that
that's not
something
good.
terrible is going to happen. It's funny. Normally he's the terrible thing that happens to people. A few nights later, he's in the forest again, with another pleading victim on his knees in front of him. They all blur together eventually, but tonight, something is different. There's a certain chill in the air. The gun feels a little heavier in his hand. He presses the suppressed Beretta against the back of his victim's head and prepares to pull the trigger when he hears
Doesn't look like a
twig snap.
Beretta to me.
The hitman looks up, worried, and sees someone else standing in the forest, peeking out from behind the tree. A witness, but not just any witness. A familiar face. Is that? No, it can't be. Is that Forrest Gump?
Hi,
Before he
Forrest
can orient
Gump.
himself, his victim gets up and runs for it. The hitman is snapped free of his stupor, and Forrest Gump is gone. In a blind panic, he runs after the victim fleeing through the forest. He draws a bead on the victim's back and fires. sending a bullet through him and dropping him to the ground. He catches up shortly after that and finishes him off. He finished the job, but he can't shake the terrified feeling of what happened. He could
Main
swear he saw
torso
Forrest Gump in
done.
the forest, watching him. And that can only mean one of two things. Either he's being stalked, or he's losing his mind entirely.
Either is
His obsession
bad.
with the film gets worse after that. He'll spend whole days just watching it again and again, back to back, trying to find the secrets that must be buried somewhere within. Sadly for him, all he finds each time is more dread. He comes to believe that the movie is truly evil, that it contains some kind of entity that is more than human, more cruel, more terrible, and more powerful. Could this have been what he saw in the woods? At night, he hears noises, footsteps in the hallway outside the apartment, and then outside his bedroom. Once upon a time, he would have worried that he's been monitored by the city's police or agents from the FBI. Now, he's worried that he's being watched by something different altogether. He starts sleeping with his gun under his pillow. It's the only way he can feel anything close to safe with that thing out there, looking for him, hunting him. But if it came for him, would bullets even be able to stop it? The hitman stops going to work. He doesn't feel safe outside his apartment anymore. His bosses are confused, perhaps even a little concerned, worried that maybe their best hired gun has gone federal. But no, he's gone insane. But that doesn't mean he isn't right. He rarely changes out of his pajamas. He's tired, jittery, filthy, with a scraggly beard growing out of his chin.
Goodness, he
All
does
he
not
does
look
these
good.
days is rewatch the movie. He thinks that if he watches it enough, he'll find some way to stop this terrible feeling he's been going through. But maybe it's making it worse, deepening his obsession. In every scene, he can feel Forrest Gump watching him through the screen. He always gives an evil grin, the same one he sometimes sees through his bedroom window in the middle of the night. Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. That's when he hears the door to his apartment open behind him. He grips his gun and rises to his feet. He can feel that a terrifying presence has entered the apartment. He needs to fight this thing, or he's going to die. He runs out into the hall of his apartment, ready to take on the threat head on. He wants to put a stop to the monster that has been making his life hell for all of these weeks. But the second he sees the figure standing in the shadows, he freezes up. It's him. It's the one and only Forrest Gump, wearing a terrifying evil smirk like a hungry predator. The hitman raises his gun and fires at the impossible intruder, but the bullets seem to have no effect. Gump lunges forward quickly and smashes the gun out of the hitman's hand with an effortless slap. All the hitman can do is turn and run, fleeing down the hallway into his bedroom and locking himself in. Bang, bang, bang. He can feel Gump smashing his fists against the door. The hitman covers his ears, huddles next to his bed, and cries. He's never been this terrified before, not even as a child. Then the door shatters into splinters, and Gump, full of fury,
Why is this happening?
enters. In what could be his dying moments, the hitman's animal brain takes over. He turns and tries to run, but Gump is far too fast. He rushes up, grabs the hitman by his shoulder from behind, and forces him down onto his knees. The hitman can't move. Gump is holding him in place, iron-like. Gump clenches his spare fist, lifts it up, and brings it down onto the back of the hitman's head with monstrous force. He will be found dead later that day. Crime scene cameras flash, capturing the grisly scene in the hitman's former apartment. The hitman's body is rolled onto a gurney and covered with a white sheet, rolled out of his apartment before decay can set in and destroy potentially valuable evidence. The lead detective on the scene is baffled by this whole setup. He's been aware of the hitman and his gang ties for years, but this death doesn't look like your typical gangland hit. After all, he'd been brutally bludgeoned to death. If he'd been done in by his fellow gangsters, he probably would have just been shot. There was no physical evidence of a forced entry or exit from the hitman's killer. Some of the hitman's neighbors had heard a handgun being discharged, but there is no blood from anyone other than the hitman on the scene. Just spent shell casings and a few bullet holes in the wall. Strange. Would an experienced hitman fire that many times and miss his target with every single shot? Whoever took him out must have been truly dangerous. The detective does what he can, searching through the hitman's possessions while the CSI team strips down the rooms, hoping to find the piece of telltale evidence that could implicate the hitman's mysterious killer. The detective can't help but notice how filthy the apartment is. It looks like it hasn't been cleaned in weeks. a sharp contrast to the hitman's history of sharp, clean murders. It's the apartment of a man who knew someone was coming for him. But who? The detective just can't seem to piece it together. But during
Now
the
this
search,
guy's
the
gonna
detective
die.
happens upon something that catches his eye, an old VHS copy of Forrest Gump. How strange. Who has a working VCR these days? The detective looks closer and sees that the VHS and its case are covered in smeared, dirty fingerprints. He's been watching this, or at least handling it, a lot. Maybe it's some vector for secret messages between him and his employers. Perhaps it has some unknown meaning. Maybe some illicit crime has been recorded over the movie. He bags the VHS as evidence and takes it back to the precinct, where his men rustle up a VCR and organize an impromptu screening. The detective is eager for a break in the case, but as the tape plays, it just seems to be Forrest Gump. The detective is extremely confused. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with the tape. Did the hitman just completely lose his mind by the time he was murdered? The detective's attention is jogged by one line, spoken by Forrest as he sits on the bench. Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Wait, that's not the line. Wasn't the line, life is like a box of chocolates? Later that night, the detective is lying in bed, unable to sleep. Somehow, it isn't the mystery of the hitman's murder that's keeping him awake. It's that one strange, misremembered line from Forrest Gump. He just can't get it out of his head. The only thing that draws his attention away is the sound of footsteps outside in the middle of the night. The detective snaps to attention, grabs his service weapon from his bedside cabinet,
That
and
looks
creeps
like a desert
downstairs.
eagle almost.
He steps out of his house and into his backyard, now completely alert. The yard is mostly bathed in darkness, save for the little island of light formed by his porch light. Still, he sees something moving in the dark and levels his gun. He calls out, saying he's with the police, that it would be an extremely bad idea to try anything. There's no response. In a panic, the detective flees back into his home. Maybe this has something to do with the hitman's murder. Perhaps the perpetrators are trying to intimidate him into dropping the investigation. He'd call backup, he'd get some kind of assistance. But what the detective doesn't know is that it's already too late. He hears a noise outside again and looks up to see a face pressed up against his window. It's Forrest Gump, grinning maniacally. He reels back his head and slams it into the glass, sending cracks crawling out into every direction. He slams again and again and again. Before the detective can even react, the window is shattered, and Forrest Gump is climbing into his home with a single-minded, murderous purpose. It all makes sense to the detective now, in a deranged sort of way. The hitman hadn't been attacked by a vengeful enemy, or taken out as a liability by his employers. He'd been murdered by Forrest Gump. And now, the detective is going to suffer the same fate.
How peculiar.
This peculiar little tale probably feels rather far-fetched to you, even by the standards of the entities and phenomena researched by the SCP Foundation. But we assure you that if you ever find yourself afflicted with SCP-5346, what was once a bizarre little case study could become a horrifying reality. Not a great deal is known about the mechanics of how exactly SCP-5346 operates, due to the rarity and obscurity of cases. But what we do know is that it affects people who view a certain scene in the beloved 1994 movie Forrest Gump, starring Tom Hanks as the titular lead character. The anomaly has a particular effect on those with an obsessive nature, or people whose occupations involve needing to focus intensely on films, such as professional film critics. The scene in the film that appears to be the vector for infection is the one where Forrest is sitting on a park bench with a box of chocolates, and opines that his mama always told him, "Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." The first sign of infection is that the person viewing the scene will immediately feel confused, believing the quote to be, "Life is like a box of chocolates," not "life was like a box of chocolates," as the character actually says. This is often
Pardon
thought
me?
to be a case of the Mandela effect, a common and harmless phenomenon where people report having false memories of prior events,
What's that?
such as misremembering a quote or believing a certain actor or public figure is dead when they're actually alive, or vice versa. However, if this incident is an actual moment of SCP-5346 infection, then the victim is in for a far more unpleasant experience. They will first report an obsessive desire to rewatch the film, watching it again and again, and each time noticing more inconsistencies between the film's reality and their memories of watching it. This will initially just seem strange, But as the condition progresses, it will take a turn for the unsettling. They will feel as though the Gump character is a malevolent force who's somehow watching them through the screen, displaying his own independent intelligence and a strong desire to harm the viewer. If the Foundation hasn't intercepted the case at this stage, it will get even worse. The victim will begin to see an individual with a remarkable resemblance to Forrest Gump stalking them in the real world, getting closer and more threatening by the day. The victim will eventually be found dead of extreme blunt force trauma to the cranium. How exactly they receive this blunt force trauma is unknown. The Foundation's discovery of this particular anomalous phenomenon began with a small thread of posts on the infamous Parawatch forums, a website dedicated to conspiracy theorists and paranormal enthusiasts of all stripes. The Foundation keeps a close eye on the Parawatch forums, as a number of anomalous cases have first been discovered through whisperings on its most strange and clandestine boards. The first post, from a user called Rage the Comic, real name Jackson Collins, detailed a peculiar experience. While quarantined in his home due to the 2020 viral pandemic, Jackson decided to re-watch Forrest Gump as a nostalgic favorite. That's when he noticed the cursed line discrepancy and decided to ask if others had the same sense of strangeness and confusion upon rewatching the film as an adult. The post quickly attracted the attention of some of the site's other users with mixed sympathy and derision. Jackson had clearly awoken something. Other forumites reported a similar sense of unease when revisiting the movie, sensing some kind of malice coming from the Forrest Gump character. But nobody was feeling this more than Jackson himself, the possible patient zero of the phenomenon. His severe paranoia increased, curdling into a dangerous obsession with the film, completely consistent with other people infected by the SCP-5346 phenomenon. This is the point where the Gump entity seemingly crossed the threshold, entering the physical world and stalking Jackson, appearing in his dreams and allegedly even staring through his windows, each time bearing a horrifying, satisfied grin. He continued posting about his journey on the forum as the SCP-5346 stalking situation escalated to a fever pitch. Jackson wouldn't actually make any further posts on the Parawatch forum after that. He seemed, for all intents and purposes, to have fallen off the map. Foundation agents who had been closely monitoring the situation decided to investigate, and when they were eventually able to find Jackson's home, they discovered that he had been dead for weeks. The cause of death was the same blunt force trauma to the cranium of all the other victims of SCP-5346. When the agents confiscated Jackson's phone, they also found a message in his drafts that he had clearly intended to post to the Parawatch forums before he had been killed. It read, "I'm not crazy. I know I'm not. This thing is definitely onto me. I'm currently hiding in a closet, forcing myself not to burst into tears. I hear it walking around my hallways. It lingers, constantly surrounding me at all times. This thing is not Gump. Hell, it's not even human. It's hungry. Whether it be for revenge or blood, I'm not exactly sure, but that doesn't matter now. I've called the police. But they won't be here in time to save me. Nor would they believe me if I told them about the monster that was hunting me down. I want to scream so badly, but I'm too terrified to throw away my life that quickly. Please, do not fall down the rabbit hole. Save yourself, or it'll come for you too. Rage the Comic, signing out." Those same agents also found a note in Jackson's home, handwritten, that said, "Mama always said to stand up to snitches." SCP-5346 is currently classified as uncontained because the sheer rarity of instances have made attempts to capture any kind of physical entity relating to 5346 a waste of Foundation resources. Instead, containment efforts on this anomaly are focused on finding and suppressing posts like the ones shown in this video, and getting to any affected individuals before SCP-5346 can cause them physical harm. To do your part in helping the Foundation contain SCP-5346, exercise caution when obsessing over nostalgic films, because like a certain container full of confectionaries, you never know what you're going to get. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-674, the exposition
I would
gun
love
makes Nintendo
Dr.
real
Bob
life.
or someone else like Dr. Bob to do file on Dr. Bob. It was extremely weird. A spring talk video as well.
It is the 29th March, 1999. At 6:40 p.m., the body of Megan Willow was found inside her residence. She had been exposed to parasitic spores called hatholites,
Is it toast?
which have recently entered the atmosphere. Her body shut down during the mutation process, causing her death. Hatholites will die with their host if the body is unhealthy and unsustainable. It is unknown how many hatholites entered the atmosphere, and if other residents have been infected. We have transmitted an alert advising all residents to stay indoors and wear filtration masks issued by the Anomaly Research Task Force.
Oh, that's not good. Why are you sleeping with your freaking tent door open? You're inviting bugs and raccoons to eat your face. No sympathy for this guy, he's an idiot. Oh no. That's bad. Huh. Hi? You just gonna sit there? Oh dear. Okay, I finished sculpting the dead Huggy.
My name is Elena, and what I encountered during my first night shift at a Florida Walmart still haunts my dreams. It was the lead up to the holiday season, yet the store was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the festive cheer that filled the air outside. I was assigned to restock shelves, a simple task, I thought, until I reached aisle 7. Aisle 7, with its array of toys, should have been a place of joy and laughter, but instead, it was the epicenter of unexplained phenomena that had both staff and shoppers whispering in hushed tones. Toys were found scattered off their shelves. An inexplicable chill surrounded you as soon as you walked there. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you'd hear the cries of a child. On that first night, as I approached the aisle, I thought that I saw a child staring at me from the distance. Odd hours, not many adults around. I worried that the child was lost. But as I went towards him, he disappeared. Another employee, sensing my confusion, casually remarked that it's Samuel. That is when I learned that a few years ago, the store was engulfed in a small fire. A woman was trapped in flames. Her boy ran and saved her, but suffocated in the smoke. This revelation cast a shadow over Aisle 7, the joy it once held replaced by a lingering sorrow. The haunting grew more intense with each passing night. Toys hurled off shelves with unseen force, aimed directly at me. Spectral footprints appeared in the dust, leading nowhere, and Samuel's sobbing became a constant backdrop to my shift. While my colleagues largely ignored the obvious paranormal phenomenon, I somehow felt that he was reaching out to me, desperate to communicate. Driven by a mix of fear and determination, I resolved to understand Samuel's purpose, to find a way to help him find peace. As my shift drew to a close, Samuel's sobs echoed one last time down Aisle 7. I knew then that I could not turn away and have to help this lost soul, no matter the cost. The next evening, I returned to Walmart with
You
a
say
dinner.
no matter the
I would
cost till
communicate
it
with
costs
Samuel,
your life,
reach
lady.
out to him in a way that transcended the barriers between the living and the spirit trapped in sorrow. Armed with sacks of salt from the store shelves, I reached Aisle 7. I researched about communicating with spirits online and found that salt acts as a powerful medium to bridge the gap. I punctured the sacks and spread the salt on the dark floor. The store was quieter than usual. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting long shadows that seemed to dance at the edge of my vision. I called out to Samuel, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. Samuel, if you're here, I want to help you. Can you understand me? But nothing. I said it again, and this time, a toy truck flew off the shelf to my right. The air suddenly grew colder, and then the salt began to shift, forming words in response to my plea.
Mom.
His response was a single word, but it carried the weight of his longing and confusion. My eyes welled with tears as I realized the depth of his despair. Samuel didn't know he was gone, trapped in a world he no longer belonged to. Samuel, you're safe with me. I want to help you find peace. The salt shifted again, the grains moving with purpose. It was then I understood. Samuel was lost, not just in the afterlife, but in his understanding of his fate. He was searching for his mother, clinging to the hope that she could still save him. As we communicated, Samuel revealed his heart's desire. Before the fire, his mother had given him a ring. In his last moments, consumed by smoke and flames, he had lost it. He wanted his mother's ring. The revelation was a turning point. If the ring was the key to Samuel's unrest, then finding it was my mission. A coworker, intrigued by my late-night endeavors, shared a piece of forgotten lore. The store had been rebuilt. Flooring had been done over the original. If the ring existed, it was hidden beneath us. Fueled by a newfound resolve, I enlisted the help of sympathetic coworkers. After hours, armed with tools borrowed from the hardware section, we began our dig beneath the store. The work was hard, the floor unyielding, but the thought of Samuel's soul finding peace drove us forward. Finally, our efforts bore fruit. Beneath layers of dust and
There we
debris, we found a ring, its metal warm against the cold ground. As I held it aloft, the store suddenly plunged into darkness, the lights flickering out, leaving us in an abyss of shadows. When the lights returned, the ring was gone from my hand, but so was the chilling presence that had haunted Aisle 7. In its place was a warmth, a comforting feeling that enveloped us. The air was lighter, the shadows receded, and the oppressive atmosphere that had dominated the store was lifted. Samuel's sobbing, the laughter, and the cold drafts were gone. Aisle 7, once a site of sorrow and fear, now felt just like any other part of the store. The toys lay in their places, untouched by unseen hands, the air free of the sound of weeping. As dawn broke, casting its light through the front windows of the store, I knew Samuel had found his peace,
Yeah.
The ring, a symbol of a mother's love, had freed him, allowing his spirit to move on. The store, once a site of tragedy, now held a sense of calm, a testament to the power of compassion and determination.
Yeah, they
Walking out into the morning light, I felt
got
a
fired.
weight lift from my shoulders. The haunting of aisle 7 was over, and with it, my fear. Samuel's story, a tale of loss and longing, had reached its end, but the journey had changed me, taught me the strength of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds of love.
Yeah, but you got fired and probably got charged damages.
As I stepped into the dimly lit, cavernous space of the Walmart in Austin, the air was thick with tension, a stark contrast to the usual hum of daily commerce. The call had come in as a typical hostage situation, surprisingly just when I was driving to work to quit my job. But I changed my mind because the brief on the suspect was anything but typical. A woman, claiming invisible forces controlled the fate of all within, had shot dead 3 people and taken several hostages. She came armed with makeshift weapons and DIY bombs. Her demand? She just wanted the president to acknowledge that there was no free will and invisible threads were manipulating their lives. I approached cautiously. The store looked like the aftermath of a storm, chaos everywhere. I had to walk for a good 10 minutes to reach the counter where she had barricaded herself and the hostages. The woman was Dr. Cassandra Lyle, a name that had once been associated with groundbreaking theoretical physics, but now was synonymous with chaos.
She worked in theoretical
physics. She was
physics.
wheezing
No
like a
wonder she went
rabid
crazy.
dog, crying, then laughing, then talking to herself, then suddenly shooting a bullet in the air.
Welcome, negotiator.
She called out, as if she had been expecting me, her figure emerging from the shadows. She was smaller than I'd imagined, but the guns in her hands were unmistakably real and deadly. I introduced myself, keeping my voice steady. Dr. Lyle, let's talk about how we can resolve this peacefully. A laugh escaped her.
Peace? There's no peace in being controlled. It's just a state of mind, and the world will know it soon.
She had a lot to say, so I had to patiently listen, make her believe that I could be on her side. She lectured on the nature of reality, control, and the experiments that had shattered her mind. It was evident that Cassandra was not just smart, she was a genius, pushed to the brink. Her theories, once celebrated in the academic world, now served as the foundation of her delusion that she could untangle her fate by exposing others to the truth of their manipulation. The chaos she orchestrated around us was a demonstration of her theory. Shelves toppled over, messages written with bullets, hostages positioned in calculated spots, along with motion sensors throughout the store. If one tried to run, 2 others would be shot by homemade sensor-triggered guns. They were all lab rats to her.
Look around you,
she urged, gesturing to the chaos.
This is no random act. It's a carefully constructed experiment.
And that's when it hit me. I was a part of it too. The negotiation, my presence was her plan. For someone who believed the world is controlled by invisible threads, she wanted to prove that she's controlling this. The stakes have never been higher. I wasn't just negotiating for the hostages' lives. I was fighting to prove we weren't just pawns in her deranged game. Her movements were unpredictable, yet patterned. It was clear she was steps ahead, anticipating moves in a game only she fully understood. As we spoke, her monologues veered between lucidity and madness. She spoke of her research, detailing experiments that blurred the lines between physics and philosophy, reality and perception. The hostages were chess pieces in her grand design. She wanted the world to see, to understand the invisible threads she believed controlled them. But in her eyes, I saw more than just a desire to enlighten. There was a plea for validation, for someone to acknowledge her genius. Realizing this, I shifted tactics, engaging her not as a negotiator to a hostage taker, but as a peer to a scientist. I questioned her theories, challenged her conclusions, and in doing so, saw the first flicker of doubt cross her face. It was a small victory, but a crack in the armor she had built around her psyche. "I'm not your enemy, Cassandra," I found myself saying, using her first name in an attempt to reach the person behind the psychosis. "But this isn't the way to prove your theories." Her laughter, sharp and sudden, cut through the tension.
You think this is about proving something to the world? No. This is about proving something to myself.
The game changed in that moment. It was no longer about the invisible threads of control, but about a woman trying to reclaim her authority. The realization was my opening, the weakness in her strategy I had been searching for. With careful words, I began to dismantle the world she had built in the store, pointing out the inconsistencies in her actions and the reality she perceived. Slowly, the fervor in her eyes dimmed, replaced by confusion, then realization. The guns lowered, her posture slumped, and for the first time since the standoff began, Cassandra Lyle looked defeated. It was then, in her moment of vulnerability, that the real battle was won. The SWAT team, having waited for my signal, moved in, securing the store and ensuring the safety of all inside. Dr. Lyle was taken into custody. In the aftermath, as the hostages were led out to the embrace of waiting loved ones, Cassandra was pulled away by 4 men as she yelled at the top of her voice and threw her hands around. The store lights flickered back to normalcy, and just as the mad woman was being taken out past me, she stopped, looked into my eyes for a few seconds, and smiled before saying,
I broke the threads so I will be put down, but they don't know that you broke them too.
This left me puzzled. What did she mean by that? And that is when it hit me. If she had not orchestrated all of this, I would have quit my job right now. The invisible threads wanted that of me, but because of her deadly game, I changed my fate and learned her theory. I broke the invisible threads too because of her. The truth, like the invisible thread she spoke of, remained elusive, tangled in the intersection of science, belief, and the human mind's unfathomable depths. But I had a feeling that I had a lot more work to do.
This happened just a couple of weeks ago when I went to Walmart one night. I think it was about 8 o'clock, and I went there to only get a few things. When I got inside the store, it seemed pretty normal to me. It wasn't too busy,
What's normal
and it wasn't
for a
completely
Walmart?
dead either. I didn't waste any time and started walking to the right. The first thing on my list was to get some more soap. As I was walking down that way, I remember seeing a man walking in the opposite direction. He was wearing a shirt that said "Human Mammal" on it. I specifically remember seeing that. But afterwards, I passed him by and kept walking. After getting the soap, I then headed towards the back end of the store. I was over there getting the last several items, and it took me a little bit over 5 minutes. Then I headed back towards the front end of the store. When I made it a little more than halfway to the front, that particular area was very quiet. But there was one person there, and they caught my attention. It was the man that I had seen earlier, and he was standing in a random aisle, just pushing things off the shelf. It was like he was trying to make a mess. The man had slightly long dark hair, was somewhat big, and a little bit less than 6 feet tall. When I saw him doing this, I couldn't help but look. I was going to just keep walking past him, but when I got kind of close to him, I stopped. The man looked at me as he continued throwing things on the floor. I asked him what he was doing. I didn't say it in a way as if I worked at Walmart or as if I was mad at him. I was just genuinely curious. The man looked at me as I spoke, but did not stop his actions. After my question, he looked away and completely ignored me. I looked around and did not see any employees in the immediate area. When I looked back to the man, he was giving me the middle finger. I thought about saying something to the guy, but decided not to and just walked away. Somebody would see what he was doing soon enough, and he would probably get kicked out of the store or banned. I walked the rest of the way over to the self-checkouts. Then I checked out and started to leave. Well, I guess as I was checking out, the man in the human mammal shirt walked over to me without me knowing, because as soon as I was walking into the parking lot, I looked back and saw the guy walking behind me. He was like 50 feet back, and at first, I wasn't sure if he just happened to be leaving at the same time as me or not. I don't even know why I decided to look behind me, but I'm glad that I did. The guy appeared to be looking right at me, which was strange, but I ignored it. I continued as normal and got to my car, unlocked it, and went inside. I wasn't in a rush to leave or anything, but when I started the engine and was getting ready to back out, I saw him. The human mammal had followed me all the way to my car and was now standing right behind it. He was looking at me through the rear window of my vehicle.
Human mammal
I
as
waited for about a
opposed
minute,
to
and he
human
didn't move at all.
reptile?
Then I rolled down my window and yelled to the guy, asking him to move. He ignored me completely. He just stood there with barely any expression on his face. This guy was really confusing to me. I honked my horn and he still didn't move. So then I turned my engine off and got out of my car. At first, the man still didn't move. I asked him what his problem was and he still ignored me. I wasn't really sure what to do. I didn't want to get in the guy's face or anything because he seemed sort of unpredictable. I decided to walk back inside Walmart. As I went through the parking lot, the man calmly walked behind me, following me yet again. By the time I made it to the doors, he was maybe 10 feet behind me. When I walked inside, I wasn't really sure where to go, so I just started walking. But when I made it sort of past the self-checkouts, I saw a few employees standing around. The man behind me was still about 10 feet back, and one of the employees approached him. He tried to walk past, but another employee walked in front of him. I heard that they were confronting him about throwing things off the shelves of the aisles. Somebody must have seen him, or possibly he was seen on security cameras. This allowed me to get away from the guy, and I turned around and left the store while he was still there. This time, he wasn't able to follow me. I left and haven't seen him since. Hopefully he was banned from the store or something. I'm really not sure why he did all of that. It was like he was just trying to cause problems.
Alright. Well, I'll have to paint the little dead Huggy tomorrow. But, he turned out pretty good. That's not too different from Walmart. Walmart's full of weirdos. So yeah, by next time I stream, yeah, Huggy Pants is dead. Anyways, I'll paint him next time. He'll be painted by next stream, and we'll have a cute little dead Huggy figurine forever. And it'll be awesome. And we'll also have Goose from the Untitled Goose game. Anyways, thank you all for hanging out with me for the stream. I gotta go play possum now for a little while. I'll catch you next Tuesday. Good night, everybody.